Sometimes the person standing quietly at the gate is the one everyone should have been waiting for. The morning sun had just begun rising over the coastal military installation, casting a golden glow across the security entrance where vehicles moved through carefully organized checkpoints. For Officer Daniel Hayes, it looked like any other routine assignment. The 31-year-old police officer had spent years learning that preparation, patience, and attention to detail were the foundation of good service. He checked his equipment, reviewed the latest security instructions, and watched as employees, contractors, and visitors followed the established procedures of the busy military facility. Then a dark vehicle approached the entrance carrying a man who seemed completely comfortable in the environment, but whose identification details required additional verification. The man introduced himself calmly as Commander Ethan Brooks, a United States Navy SEAL officer returning for official business. He wore a simple uniform, carried himself with quiet confidence, and answered every question with respect. There was no frustration in his voice, no impatience in his expression, only calm cooperation. Daniel carefully followed protocol, knowing that every person entering a sensitive location deserved the same level of attention and accuracy. He did not know that the person standing in front of him had spent decades serving at some of the highest levels of military responsibility. He did not know that Commander Brooks was trusted by senior leaders and respected by teams across the country. All Daniel knew was that his responsibility was to verify information and make sure every step was completed correctly. Imagine standing there in that moment, surrounded by security cameras, military vehicles, and the quiet movement of a busy base, while two professionals from different worlds follow the same goal, doing their jobs the right way. Commander Brooks looked across the checkpoint with the patience of someone who understood that procedures existed for a reason. He had spent his career depending on accuracy, discipline, and teamwork. Daniel respected that attitude, even though he still needed to complete the process. As minutes passed, additional communication began between departments to confirm the details connected to the visit. Inside the security office, digital systems displayed information that required careful review. Personnel members worked through the proper channels, checking records and contacting the appropriate officials. Outside, the morning continued as normal. Aircraft moved in the distance, service members walked between buildings, and the base remained focused on its daily mission. Neither man realized that this ordinary checkpoint interaction would soon become a lesson shared across multiple organizations. One person represented years of military leadership. The other represented the responsibility of protecting a community through careful decisions. Both believed in the same principle. Trust must be earned through actions, and the truth must always be confirmed before conclusions are made. As the final pieces of information began coming together, Daniel looked toward Commander Brooks and realized that this was not just another routine encounter. It was a reminder that every person has a story, every uniform carries responsibility, and every decision has the power to reveal the importance of professionalism. Commander Ethan Brooks remained standing near the checkpoint with the same calm patience that had defined every chapter of his military career. While security personnel continued verifying official records through established channels, he quietly observed the activity around him without showing the slightest sign of frustration. The steady movement of service members across the installation reminded him that every successful mission, whether military or civilian, depended on people trusting procedures even when those procedures required time. Officer Daniel Hayes noticed that unusual composure. Most people delayed at a secure gate eventually became impatient, asked repeated questions, or tried to speed the process along. Commander Brooks did none of those things. Instead, he thanked the security specialist who collected additional information, stepped aside without complaint, and waited with complete confidence that the facts would eventually speak for themselves. Imagine watching two professionals separated by different careers but connected by the same commitment to responsibility. Neither man understood that the ordinary minutes passing between them would later become an example discussed in leadership training rooms across multiple agencies. Inside the Security Operations Center, communication specialists compared identification records with official travel authorizations and contacted the appropriate command offices to confirm scheduled meetings. Large digital displays showed arrival logs, vehicle registrations, and authorization requests, while experienced personnel carefully reviewed every detail. No one rushed the process because accuracy always mattered more than speed. Outside, the coastal air carried the distant sound of aircraft preparing for routine operations. Service members walked confidently between administrative buildings. Maintenance crews completed their morning inspections, and the installation continued functioning with disciplined precision. Daniel remained near the checkpoint, occasionally glancing toward Commander Brooks, whose quiet confidence seemed almost effortless. It was not confidence built on rank alone. It was the confidence of someone who had spent years understanding that professional organizations became stronger when every individual respected the system designed to protect everyone equally. As additional information arrived, one security supervisor quietly requested another level of confirmation through military command. Daniel listened carefully without interrupting, realizing that sensitive assignments often involved information unavailable through standard databases. The realization did not change his responsibility. It simply reinforced the importance of allowing the verification process to reach its proper conclusion before making assumptions. Commander Brooks understood exactly what was happening because he had participated in similar security reviews throughout his own career. He knew that classified responsibilities sometimes required additional coordination between departments, and he appreciated seeing people perform their duties carefully rather than carelessly. When one young service member apologized for the unexpected delay, Commander Brooks smiled politely and reminded him that protecting a military installation required patience from everyone involved. Those simple words immediately eased the tension inside the security office. Daniel heard the conversation and found himself reflecting on how leadership often appeared in the quietest moments rather than the loudest ones. A few minutes later, another secure communication arrived from the command headquarters requesting a direct conversation with the installation commander before final authorization could be completed. The atmosphere remained professional, but Daniel sensed that the situation carried greater significance than anyone had initially expected. Standing beneath the clear morning sky, he realized that every uniform represented years of dedication. Every badge carried responsibility, and every careful decision made today would shape the trust people placed in those institutions tomorrow. The message from command headquarters changed the atmosphere around the security office, but it did not create panic. Instead, it brought a new level of attention to the careful process already underway. Officer Daniel Hayes watched as experienced personnel continued their work with the same discipline they had shown from the beginning. There were no sudden reactions, no rushed decisions, only professionals following each required step. Commander Ethan Brooks remained near the checkpoint, quietly observing the communication between teams. His calm expression never changed because he understood something many people learned only after years of experience. Important moments were often decided by how people handled uncertainty. Inside the command office, senior officials reviewed the information connected to Commander Brooks' arrival. They examined authorization records, scheduled meetings, and official communication between military departments. Every detail confirmed that the situation was not about stopping a person, but about ensuring that the correct procedures had been followed before allowing access to a secure location. Daniel stood nearby, listening carefully as the information became clearer. He thought about how easy it could be for anyone to rely on assumptions when they did not have the complete picture. Yet the responsibility of his position required something different. It required patience. It required attention. It required the discipline to wait for verified facts. Commander Brooks noticed Daniel's thoughtful expression and offered a few words of encouragement. He explained that throughout his military career, he had seen countless situations where the best decisions came from people who stayed calm and focused. Leadership was not about having every answer immediately. Leadership was about creating the conditions where the right answer could be discovered. Those words stayed with Daniel as the final verification process continued. The checkpoint that had started as an ordinary assignment had become a quiet lesson about professionalism. Around them, the military base continued operating normally. Vehicles moved along designated roads, service members attended scheduled meetings, and the sound of daily operations filled the air. The world outside the security office remained unaware of the important lesson unfolding inside. After nearly an hour of careful review, the command team received the final confirmation they needed. Commander Brooks' identity, assignment, and purpose for visiting the installation were officially verified. The security personnel immediately prepared the necessary access procedures, and Daniel thanked everyone involved for maintaining professionalism throughout the process. Commander Brooks looked at Daniel and offered a respectful nod. There was no frustration in his expression, only appreciation for someone who had taken his responsibility seriously. Daniel realized that the outcome was not determined by how quickly the situation ended. It was determined by the choices people made while waiting for the truth to become clear. As Commander Brooks continued toward the base facilities, Daniel watched him disappear among the buildings of the installation. The morning light reflected across the roads and structures around him, creating a moment of quiet reflection. What had started as a simple checkpoint interaction had revealed something much deeper. Trust was not created by avoiding difficult situations. Trust was created when people handled those situations with patience, respect, and integrity. And for Daniel Hayes, that lesson would remain long after the gates closed behind Commander Brooks. Commander Ethan Brooks completed his scheduled meetings inside the installation while the events at the security checkpoint quietly moved through the appropriate administrative channels. What seemed like a routine verification had attracted the attention of senior leaders, not because anyone had acted with bad intentions, but because the situation offered an opportunity to evaluate how different organizations communicated during sensitive operations. By early afternoon, Officer Daniel Hayes received a request to attend a professional debriefing inside the installation headquarters. The invitation surprised him. He expected paperwork, perhaps a brief report, but not a conversation involving military command staff and civilian supervisors. As he entered the conference room, sunlight reflected through tall windows onto a polished wooden table where representatives from base security, local law enforcement, and military administration were already reviewing timelines, communication records, and authorization procedures. Commander Brooks greeted everyone with the same quiet professionalism he had displayed throughout the morning. His calm demeanor immediately set the tone for the meeting. Imagine walking into a room expecting criticism, only to discover that every person present is focused on finding better solutions instead of assigning blame. That realization immediately changed Daniel's perspective. A senior installation commander began by thanking every agency for respecting established procedures. He explained that secure facilities depended upon careful verification, and every organization shared the same responsibility of protecting people, information, and public trust. Communication logs were displayed on large monitors, showing each step that had been taken from the moment Commander Brooks arrived until his authorization had been fully confirmed. Every action followed policy, yet the review also revealed several opportunities to improve coordination between military databases and civilian communication systems. Daniel listened carefully while taking notes. He realized that professionalism was measured not only by following procedures, but also by constantly improving them. Commander Brooks then spoke for the first time since the meeting had begun. His voice remained steady and respectful as he explained that throughout his career, he had participated in countless operations where success depended upon teams from different backgrounds trusting one another without allowing assumptions to replace verified information. He praised the patience shown by everyone involved and reminded the room that security and respect could exist together when people remained committed to facts. His words carried unusual weight because they were delivered without emotion or personal criticism. They reflected decades of experience leading people through situations where discipline mattered more than pride. The atmosphere gradually shifted from reviewing a single incident to discussing future cooperation. Military officials proposed additional joint training with local agencies, while police supervisors recommended updated communication protocols whenever personnel with specialized assignments visited secure facilities. Daniel recognized that he was witnessing something larger than one day's events. He was watching institutions become stronger because experienced leaders chose collaboration over conflict. As the meeting concluded, the installation commander thanked Daniel personally for maintaining professionalism throughout an uncertain situation and encouraged him to continue asking careful questions whenever facts required verification. Walking outside beneath the clear afternoon sky, Daniel paused for a moment before returning to his patrol vehicle. The coastal breeze moved quietly across the parade grounds while service members continued their daily routines, unaware that inside one conference room, a routine checkpoint had become the foundation for stronger partnerships built upon patience, accountability, and mutual respect. The days following the interagency meeting marked the beginning of something few people could have predicted. Instead of allowing the experience to become another report stored in an archive, both organizations agreed to transform it into a model for stronger cooperation. Commander Ethan Brooks returned to his operational responsibilities with the same quiet discipline that had guided every assignment throughout his career, while Officer Daniel Hayes found himself thinking about the conversation inside the conference room far more often than he expected. Every patrol shift reminded him that behind every identification card, every uniform, and every official credential stood a person whose full story could never be understood through first impressions alone. Several weeks later, Daniel received an invitation to participate in a joint professional development workshop hosted by the military installation and attended by representatives from local law enforcement, military security, emergency management, and federal agencies. Walking into the auditorium, he noticed experienced leaders from different organizations greeting one another with the familiarity that comes from years of shared responsibility. Large presentation screens displayed topics centered on communication, verification procedures, and public trust. Imagine entering a room filled with professionals whose careers had been built upon protecting others, only to realize that the greatest lesson they wished to share was not about authority, but about humility. Commander Brooks stood before the audience as one of the keynote speakers, not because of his rank alone, but because his conduct during the recent events had demonstrated the kind of leadership that inspired confidence without demanding attention. He spoke calmly about the importance of remaining patient when information was incomplete and reminded everyone that confidence should never replace careful verification. He explained that true professionalism meant allowing facts to guide every important decision, especially when circumstances created uncertainty. Daniel listened with complete attention, recognizing how those words reflected every moment they had shared at the installation entrance. During a discussion session, participants from different agencies exchanged practical ideas for improving communication between civilian and military organizations. Experienced instructors presented updated coordination procedures, while younger officers asked thoughtful questions about balancing efficiency with accuracy. The atmosphere remained open, respectful, and focused entirely on continuous improvement. Daniel contributed by describing how careful verification had strengthened his own understanding of professional responsibility, emphasizing that slowing down long enough to gather complete information often prevented larger problems later. His comments received encouraging nods from supervisors who appreciated his willingness to learn rather than defend every past decision. After the workshop concluded, Commander Brooks approached Daniel outside beneath the warm afternoon sunlight. The two men walked together across the neatly maintained grounds overlooking the coastline, where the steady ocean breeze carried the sound of distant aircraft completing routine training missions. Commander Brooks thanked Daniel for embracing the experience with maturity and reminded him that every respected professional eventually faced moments that challenged personal confidence. The difference between an ordinary career and an exceptional one, he said, was found in the willingness to grow after those moments. Daniel smiled quietly, understanding that the greatest outcome had never been about one checkpoint or one conversation. It had become a lasting reminder that trust grows through patience, leadership grows through humility, and institutions become stronger whenever dedicated people choose cooperation over assumption and truth over convenience. Several months passed, and the improvements that began with one carefully handled verification continued spreading throughout every organization involved. Procedures were updated, communication channels became faster, and joint training sessions became a regular part of cooperation between local law enforcement and military security teams. Officer Daniel Hayes noticed that the atmosphere inside his department had gradually changed. Experienced supervisors encouraged younger officers to slow down whenever information was incomplete, reminding them that confidence without verification could never replace professional judgment. Those words stayed with Daniel during every patrol because they reflected lessons that had become part of his daily routine rather than temporary reminders. One cool autumn morning, he received another assignment, near the same military installation where everything had started. The familiar entrance looked almost unchanged. Service members moved efficiently between buildings, security personnel greeted authorized visitors, and the American flag rose slowly against a bright blue sky as another day of operations began. Yet Daniel realized that he himself was no longer the same officer who had first arrived there months earlier. Imagine returning to the exact place where one important lesson changed the way you viewed your profession, only to discover that the greatest difference was not the location but the person you had become. During the morning, another visitor arrived whose documentation required additional review before access could be granted. Instead of allowing uncertainty to create unnecessary pressure, Daniel calmly explained each verification step, coordinated with military personnel, and patiently waited for official confirmation through established channels. The visitor appreciated the transparency, and the entire process concluded smoothly because every participant understood the value of cooperation. Watching the interaction from inside the administration building, Commander Ethan Brooks quietly observed how naturally Daniel applied everything he had learned. Later that afternoon, Commander Brooks invited Daniel to walk across the installation after official business had concluded. They followed a quiet path overlooking the coastline, where naval aircraft could be seen conducting routine training flights in the distance. The conversation was relaxed, honest, and thoughtful. Commander Brooks explained that leadership rarely announced itself through dramatic moments. More often, it revealed itself through consistent decisions made when no one expected recognition. Daniel reflected on how much his perspective had changed since their first meeting. He admitted that he now viewed every professional encounter as an opportunity to earn trust rather than simply complete a task. Commander Brooks smiled with quiet approval and explained that institutions became stronger whenever individuals chose patience before assumption and cooperation before pride. As the afternoon sunlight stretched across the parade grounds, they paused near a memorial dedicated to generations of military service. Neither man needed many words because the lesson had already become clear. The experience had never been about one checkpoint, one conversation, or one misunderstanding. It had been about strengthening the connection between organizations that shared the same responsibility of protecting others with professionalism and integrity. Before they parted, Commander Brooks thanked Daniel for embracing growth with humility instead of resisting change. Daniel responded by expressing gratitude for the example Commander Brooks had set through calm leadership and unwavering respect for the process. As they walked toward different responsibilities beneath the fading coastal sunlight, both understood that lasting trust is never created by shortcuts. It is earned one careful decision at a time, built through patience, strengthened by truth, and carried forward by people who understand that the greatest authority always begins with character. As winter gradually gave way to spring, the partnership between the military installation and local law enforcement had evolved into something neither organization had originally planned. What began as a careful security verification had quietly become a model for professional cooperation across the region. Training officers regularly referenced the experience when discussing communication, accountability, and decision-making under uncertainty. Officer Daniel Hayes never expected to become part of those conversations, yet he accepted every opportunity to share what he had learned because he believed experience carried value only when it helped someone else avoid repeating the same mistakes. During one regional leadership seminar, newly assigned officers from several neighboring departments gathered inside a modern training facility overlooking the coastline. Instructors discussed operational planning, interagency coordination, and the importance of gathering complete information before reaching conclusions. Daniel stood before the audience and spoke honestly about the lesson that had changed his career. He explained that procedures were never obstacles standing in the way of good judgment. They existed to protect good judgment from becoming influenced by incomplete information. The room remained remarkably quiet because every person recognized the truth behind those words. Imagine standing before dozens of professionals, not to celebrate personal success, but to explain how humility became the strongest lesson of your entire career. Later that afternoon, Commander Ethan Brooks joined the seminar for a panel discussion with senior military leaders and public safety officials. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere, not because of rank alone, but but because everyone recognized the calm professionalism that had guided every stage of the original event. When asked what leadership meant after decades of military service, Commander Brooks smiled briefly before answering. He explained that genuine leadership rarely depended upon speaking the loudest or acting the fastest. Instead, it depended upon creating an environment where every member of the team felt responsible for seeking truth before making decisions. He reminded the audience that respect could never be demanded through authority alone. It had to be earned through consistency, integrity, and the willingness to remain patient when circumstances became uncertain. Daniel listened from the front row, recognizing how perfectly those words reflected every decision Commander Brooks had made since their first meeting at the installation entrance. After the seminar concluded, participants gathered outside beneath clear afternoon skies where American flags moved gently in the coastal breeze. Officers, military personnel, and emergency management leaders exchanged ideas while discussing future training opportunities designed to strengthen cooperation even further. Daniel and Commander Brooks walked together toward the parking area, continuing a conversation that no longer centered upon one specific event. Instead, they spoke about the future and the responsibility every generation carried to leave institutions stronger than they had found them. Commander Brooks observed that professional trust was built slowly through thousands of ordinary decisions that most people would never notice. Daniel nodded quietly, understanding that true growth was rarely dramatic. It appeared one thoughtful action at a time. As they shook hands before leaving, neither man viewed the other through the lens of that first encounter anymore. They saw two professionals connected by a shared commitment to service, strengthened by experience, and guided by the enduring belief that the greatest measure of leadership would always be the character demonstrated when no one expected recognition. Several months after the regional leadership seminar, the improvements inspired by that single morning at the installation gate had spread far beyond one military base. Joint training exercises were now held every quarter, bringing together local police officers, military security personnel, emergency management professionals, and federal representatives to practice communication under realistic but controlled scenarios. Officer Daniel Hayes had become one of the instructors responsible for guiding new officers through the importance of slowing down when information was incomplete. Standing before a classroom filled with recruits, he spoke without exaggeration and without trying to present himself as someone extraordinary. Instead, he described how one routine assignment had reminded him that every decision carried consequences extending far beyond a single shift. He explained that professionalism was measured by consistency rather than confidence alone. Every trainee listened carefully as real examples replaced theoretical discussions. Across the installation, Commander Ethan Brooks continued mentoring younger Navy leaders preparing for positions of greater responsibility. During one leadership session, he emphasized that authority should never become a substitute for patience. He reminded them that every organization, regardless of its mission, depended upon people who respected procedures even when those procedures required additional time. He encouraged future commanders to view every interaction with civilian agencies as an opportunity to strengthen public trust rather than simply complete a mission. Imagine watching two leaders teaching in different classrooms only a few miles apart, while unknowingly delivering the same lesson through different experiences. Their words reached different audiences, yet the message remained identical. Integrity begins long before difficult decisions appear. Late that afternoon, both men attended a statewide public safety conference where agencies presented successful examples of interagency cooperation. Representatives from neighboring jurisdictions described how updated communication protocols had reduced delays, improved coordination, and strengthened relationships between organizations that once worked independently. During a panel discussion, Daniel and Commander Brooks shared the stage with senior officials from both military and civilian leadership. Rather than focusing on one specific event, they spoke about principles that could benefit every professional regardless of rank or assignment. They discussed respectful communication, disciplined verification, transparent decision-making, and the importance of acknowledging opportunities for improvement without assigning unnecessary blame. The audience responded with thoughtful questions that turned into meaningful conversations lasting well beyond the scheduled session. As the conference concluded, Participants gathered outside beneath a clear evening sky overlooking the coastline. Conversations continued in small groups as officers exchanged contact information, commanders discussed future exercises, and young recruits listened closely to experienced mentors. Daniel realized that the greatest outcome had never been recognition or praise. It was seeing organizations that, once communicated only when necessary, now choosing to work together before challenges appeared. Commander Brooks quietly observed the same scene with quiet satisfaction, understanding that lasting change rarely arrived through dramatic moments. It grew steadily through trust, humility, and the willingness of ordinary people to make better decisions every single day. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, both men walked towards separate responsibilities, confident that the strongest partnerships would always be built by those who valued truth, professionalism, and mutual respect above everything else. 1 year later, the events that had quietly transformed two careers were no longer remembered as an isolated incident, but as the beginning of a stronger partnership between organizations committed to serving the public with professionalism and integrity. Officer Daniel Hayes had become a field training officer, guiding new recruits through the responsibilities that could never be measured by experience alone. Each morning, he reminded young officers that every badge represented a promise to seek facts before reaching conclusions, to communicate clearly, and to treat every individual with the same respect expected in return. Across the military installation, Commander Ethan Brooks continued leading with the calm confidence that had inspired everyone who worked beside him. His responsibilities had grown, yet his approach remained unchanged. He still believed that genuine authority was demonstrated through patience, humility, and unwavering commitment to the truth. During a regional public safety conference, both men found themselves invited to speak before an audience of military leaders, police supervisors, emergency managers, and future public servants. Rather than focusing on one memorable day, they reflected upon the lasting improvements that followed. Updated communication systems had strengthened coordination. Joint training exercises had become standard practice. Professional relationships once separated by organizational boundaries had developed into trusted partnerships built upon shared purpose. Imagine sitting in that audience, listening as two men from different professions explained that the greatest victories were rarely dramatic. They were found in ordinary decisions repeated every single day with honesty and discipline. Commander Brooks spoke first, reminding everyone that trust could never be demanded simply because someone wore a respected uniform. Trust had to be earned through consistency, transparency, and character. Daniel followed by explaining that one of the greatest lessons of his career was learning that patience was not hesitation. Patience was the discipline required to ensure every important decision rested upon verified facts rather than incomplete information. The audience responded with thoughtful applause, not because the story contained extraordinary heroics, but because it reflected challenges every professional eventually faced. As the conference concluded, the two men stepped outside into the warm evening air overlooking the coastline, where the setting sun painted the horizon with deep shades of gold and blue. Service members, officers, and community leaders exchanged conversations that would continue long after the event ended. Before leaving, Commander Brooks and Daniel Hayes shook hands one final time, not as strangers connected by circumstance, but as trusted colleagues united by shared values. Neither man believed the journey had been about recognition. The real achievement was knowing that future officers, future commanders, and future public servants would benefit from lessons learned through humility instead of pride. As they walked toward different responsibilities beneath the fading light, one truth remained unmistakably clear. Uniforms may identify professions, but character defines people. Procedures protect institutions, but integrity protects the public. And when truth, respect, and professionalism guide every decision, the strongest legacy is not the authority someone carries. It is the trust they leave behind.